Raymond Buys was 15 jaar oud toe hy na die kamp gestuur is. Hy het nie in die skool aangepas nie en sy ma het gehoop Alex de Koker se natuurkampe sou 'n uitweg wees. Maar na net weke is hy in die hospitaal dood aan sy beserings.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for being here today. Last week we spoke about the case of Thomas Florin and how he had a job as a chef and took his chefing job to a whole nother level when he started to do heinous things to his wife. But I will link that up here if you'd like to give that a watch. But today we're going to talk about a suggested case, so thank you very much. But what makes this case so tragic is that we let absolutely horrific things happen to those who are vulnerable, and we never learn from our mistakes. This case is going to be heartbreaking, especially the pictures that I will show you later on in this case. And it makes you wonder if these things are still going on in this country. And sadly, I have to think it probably is. But with that being said, let's get into today's case.
Intended for mature audiences only.
Today we are heading to Boksburg in Johannesburg, South Africa, where on the 2nd of June 1995, baby Raymond Buys was born. And Raymond grew up in a very broken home. He experienced his dad in and out of his life, and never really there for baby Raymond. All Raymond wanted was love from his father, but he would never get it. However, Raymond's mom tried her hardest to be there and be the support for both his mom and his dad. There were also reports that Raymond's mom had been married 3 times, but this is unconfirmed. What was, for almost all of Raymond's childhood, it was just him and his mother. In this together, just the two of them. Raymond's mom would try, but she did make mistakes, as we all do. But later on in Raymond's childhood, around 9 to 10 years old, Raymond's mother did meet a man, and Raymond's mother and this man would get to know each other, they would talk a little bit, and they would then date for a couple of months before Raymond's mother then introduced him to Raymond. And this man was named Gys Nazar. And Gys was 49 years old at the time, and Raymond, like I said, was about 9 or 10. And Gys was an incredibly strict man. He grew up in a very strict Afrikaans household. He also fought at the border, and he also just had a very militant style of the way that he tried to raise Raymond, and also how he spoke to Raymond's mother, and just how he conducted himself overall was very disciplinarian, very military style. And Gys would reprimand and discipline Raymond very strictly. And maybe Gys did this because this is how he grew up. His father did it, he saw this in the army, and it's basically just all he knew. But Raymond was an incredibly obedient boy, he was a very sweet boy, and he did what he was told. However, as Raymond got older, he decided to try and poke the bear a little bit, try and see how far he could get with things. And also, the drill sergeant way that Gys was raising Raymond got old for almost teenage Raymond incredibly quickly. So like I said, Raymond started testing the waters. He wanted to see how far he could push Gys. But things got real ugly really quickly because Gys was the man. He was the man of the house. He would tell you what to do. You don't reprimand him. You don't tell him. But Raymond was now pushing Gys's buttons and kind of back-chatting a little bit. So Gys would absolutely rage and the discipline would get even harsher. Raymond's backlash would get even more. So these two were just butting heads all the time. And Raymond, as much as he tried to push back and be rebellious, he was still incredibly soft and gentle. Raymond would never want to hurt anything, any animal, or anyone. He was just a good, loving boy. But to Gys, this was incredibly irritating. He apparently hated the fact that Raymond was so soft and so gentle and so pleasant. He wanted a man. He wanted this young teenage boy to kind of rub his wounds in dirt, to go play rugby on the field, to kick a ball around, toxic masculinity kind of thing. But sports were not really for Raymond. He didn't enjoy playing rugby. He didn't enjoy playing cricket. And as much as Gys brought him these balls and brought him cricket bats and cricket helmets and everything like that, Raymond was just not biting. He didn't want to go stand out in the sun for hours and play cricket. He didn't want to get tackled by boys in rugby. It just wasn't his vibe at all. But to Gys, Raymond seemed incredibly feminine, incredibly weak in his eyes, and he didn't want this for his now stepson. But as much as Gys tried to push this narrative onto Raymond, it just didn't work because Raymond was Raymond. But eventually, Raymond's mom and Gys would have a baby together, and they named him Gys Jr. And Raymond adored his baby brother. He was always there playing with his baby brother, protecting him and making sure that he was all right, checking if his mom needed anything. He was just a sweet boy. But by the time 2007 rolled on, things in the house started to get more and more tense with Raymond and Gijs. Raymond was now entering high school almost, and he was irritated, frustrated, and annoyed that people kept trying to change him. And for more context, as Raymond was now leaving junior school, now heading to high school, he was almost there, but as he was now heading to this next chapter of his life, his peers and people around him were constantly telling him that he was too feminine. They were constantly telling him that he was not like other boys. Why is he not playing rugby? Why is he not playing sports outside with the boys? Why is he sitting with the animals and petting them and loving them? Why is he not getting dirty with the other boys? And also, why doesn't he talk like them? Why doesn't he say things that they do? It was just constant everywhere. He never felt a safe place at home in the sense of him being himself, because Gijs was there, and Gijs didn't like who Raymond was, apparently. And also now his peers and his supposed friends were also kind of planting the seed. Why aren't you like this, Raymond? Why aren't you like that? Why are you not like other boys? So all this pressure eventually got to Raymond, and he would constantly run away from home. He was tired of being in a situation where nobody felt safe to him. And in 2007, Raymond was apparently diagnosed with ADHD and was prescribed Ritalin, but he never took it. Now, we have established that Raymond is different, and teenagers can be awful. They bullied Raymond so much to an extent that he had to move schools 3 times, and each time they would see Raymond as different and pick on him. And sadly, there were also reports by Raymond's mom later on that Raymond would get so incredibly overwhelmed by all of this bullying, and that when he was being bullied, he would often wet himself, and this would only exacerbate the bullying even more, especially if it was in front of Gijs or in front of his peers. But then Gijs, in his brilliancy, decided that the best place for Raymond would actually be a reformatory or a naughty boys school where they kind of make a man out of you. So Raymond would then be there for 3 months. He would go to this reformatory for 3 months, and then he would be whipped into shape according to Gijs. And this now cost 20,000 Rand back in 2011, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money now for only 3 months. So it was a lot of money then as well. So this reformatory was based on a farm, and it was a very rural area. There was not much around this reformatory. So when you got to the farm's entrance had like these massive elephant tusks at the gate. But as you are getting to the entrance with these fake elephant tusks, there are these massive electric fences going down the whole farm where there are dogs guarding the property as well. And if that doesn't say it all, there was a massive flag of the Avia beer hanging from the flagpole. But if you're not South Africa, the Avia beer is a resistance movement in South Africa. But we are not going to go into politics right now. But at the gate, Gijs, Raymond, and his mom were all inside the car, and now they drove through this gate that was opening, and they then drove to the reception where they were then met by the general. Now Raymond, who was around 15, 16 years old, was now face to face with the general, looking at Gijs and looking at his mom, and he doesn't know what he's in for. So the general then ushers everybody in, and they all go and sit in this like reception area. Like we said, they sit on the couches, and the general is now writing out something on paper. Now Raymond's kind of looking around, and he sees on the wall are these like hunting trophies. There's pictures of the other boys that he's made into men. So it is clear that he's going to have discipline instilled into him. But now I'm going to show you a picture of Raymond and Raymond's mom, and this was the last picture that they would take together. So once Gijs and Raymond's mother left the farm, Raymond soon realized that this was not the place that was promised by Gijs and by the general before everyone left. Alex de Cocker, who was 49 years old at the time, was the general. And this camp was highly focused on discipline and was nothing like what was said in the pamphlets. Raymond's mother believed that Raymond was going to this camp in order to be part of a conservation type education where they would then learn to be rangers or some type of animal ranger within these massive wildlife parks that we have in South Africa. Alex de Cocker was born in 1964 and served 2 years in the military, and he absolutely loved this. He thrived on discipline and he loved the violence of it, and he also loved Afrikaans supremacy, apparently, because he would often walk around with the Avia beer flag on him, and he would have many old apartheid flags on the farm. His farm had no electricity, there was no running water, and later his children and wife would come out to say that Alex de Cocker was an absolutely brutal disciplinarian in his house, and he would beat his children, shout and scream at them as well. But Alex ran this camp with a man called Michael Erasmus, who was 21 years old at the time, and these two men had this feeling of utter superiority. They were God's gifts to these boys and discipline and making them into men, according to themselves. But sadly, and not surprisingly, I guess, when reading about this camp, they were not only focused on making boys into men, but also apparently trying to take the fee out of boys as well. And this word is incredibly derogatory. So this is toxic masculinity on steroids. But Alex and Michael would walk around calling each other by military ranks and thinking that they were alpha males, and they thought that they were incredibly fit and the utter essence of what masculinity should be. But, sorry, I couldn't say that with a straight face. But these guys were incredibly cruel. Not only would Alex and Michael discipline these boys in the sense of a military style, making them crawl under barbed wire, making them duck walk on the floor, telling them to climb ropes all day, not give them any water, but they would subject them to incredibly strenuous exercise and torture them. If Michael and Alex felt that one of the boys was stepping out of line or not doing that they were told, or that they were maybe becoming too familiar or friendly with Alex or Michael, they would throw boiling water on these boys, smack them, punch them, beat them. They would also then tie their legs together with rope, take their shirt off, put them on the floor, then tie this rope that is tied to their legs to the end of a bakkie and drag them for a couple of meters. Now, we got to remember that these are all young boys. These are not men that Michael and Alex are torturing. But anyway, let's get back to Raymond. When Raymond was dropped off, he was thin, but not skinny. He had an athletic build and was in perfect health for a 15-year-old boy. He was almost already 1.8 meters tall at 15 years old, so he was a tall boy. When Raymond was there, he was then given a military-type uniform, and he was taken to his tent, which he shared with another boy. But just like predatory birds, Michael and Alex would see that Raymond was different, and they instantly caught onto this, and they instantly picked on him, and they made Raymond Buys' life absolute hell while he was there for a couple of months. They would spit on him, they would kick him, they would push him, they would punch him. And they would also tell other boys on the farm to do the same. And if they saw that other boys weren't hurting Raymond, they would then hurt the other boys. So Raymond was getting it constantly here now as well. So naturally, Raymond wanted to run away, and he tried. And Raymond actually did get over the fence, and he ran 1 kilometer to the neighbor's house, where the neighbor then took one look at Raymond. He listened to his story. He then put Raymond back in his car and drove him back to the reformatory. So there was no escape, and no one was listening to Raymond. And sadly, Raymond Buys was so drained and so upset that he did try to take his own life by hanging, but he was found and he was cut down, and because he survived, he was hurt even more by Alex and Michael. Raymond's tent mate was named Gerard Oosthuizen, and he was 19 years old at the time. Gerard would later be essential in court later on, but Gerard was the only nice boy to Raymond, and he would try to keep his beatings to a very soft smack or to try not do it at all. Gerard would also say that often he would see Raymond being dragged out of his tent in the middle of the night and then either tied to a flagpole, either tied to a chair, but often tied to a flagpole, stripped naked, punched, kicked in the groin area. And to think about a 15-year-old being tied to a pole and then kicked in the groin area with absolutely no defense because his hands are behind his back and no protection is just cruel and unnecessary, and I don't know what's going on in your mind. He would also often, while being tied to this flagpole, have a pillowcase put over his head, and then he would often be electrocuted with a cattle prod or with any other electrical device that Alex and Michael could find. Now, we know that this is not the first type of abuse that we've heard at these reformatories or naughty boys schools. We know that it went on for an incredibly long time, and a lot of boys in South Africa and probably around the world are really traumatized by what happened in these reformatories. But it is also not really spoken about because there's still this kind of you need to be a man aspect, and the beatings and the punches and the torture that these boys probably went through often was just a way of life back then for these boys, and they really had no one to talk to. But while being tied to this flagpole, Raymond was still wetting himself. And sadly, this, like before with his bullies in school, would only exacerbate the problem, and Michael and Alex would absolutely torture Raymond even more. And because Raymond was wetting himself, Michael and Alex felt that it was necessary to not allow him to wash himself. So they would then take one of those bri brushes with the really hard metal ends, or like those wire brushes that you use to wash the dishes, to wash Raymond's skin with. And now this boy was bleeding and they were just rubbing him with sweat and dry skin. There was no soap, no water. If they did wet Raymond or allow him to bath in any way, they would just put him outside naked and hose him down. And they would also not allow him ever inside the main hall where the other boys ate, because they thought that Raymond was dirty and stinky and they didn't want him with the other boys. So they never let him, Raymond, sit with his peers and eat. And also Raymond was starving. They wouldn't even let him eat. And if they did, they would make him eat his own feces, dishwashing liquid. Like, it was just absolute torture for this young boy. Also, one of the main weapons that Alex would use in order to apparently beat Raymond with was a shovel or a spade, because Alex felt that this was a weapon that you wouldn't really be able to pinpoint was used on a human body. So clearly he's done this before. And because Raymond was not getting water, he was not getting food, he was being tortured daily, he was weak. And this would infuriate Alex even more. He was so irritated by Raymond's inability to do things. So Raymond's mom would often come to the farm and try to call him and speak to him and often drive there, but she was turned around most of the time because Alex would lie and say that this would disrupt his progress. So Raymond's mother believed him. But eventually Raymond's mom had had enough. And on the 12th of March 2011, Raymond's mom threatened to call the police if she did not hear from her son. And sadly, when Raymond called her, this would be the last time that she would talk to Raymond. Raymond's mom also got photos sent to her a couple of days later, and she was absolutely shocked by what he looked like, and that really egged her on to get to see her son. So she drove to the farm again after she had spoken to Raymond, but Alex again turned her around and refused, and Raymond's mother sat there for hours and hours waiting for her son to come out, but Alex never let her see her son again. And if we'd have a look at the photos that Raymond's mom received, the difference is absolutely shocking. This was Raymond before he went into the camp. He seems like a happy, healthy 15 or 16-year-old boy. And this is what he looked like when he was in the camp. Now, Gijs, when Raymond's mom showed him these photos, would try and play it off and be like, yeah, but he's in this military institution. They run around all the time. They don't get time to eat. So obviously he's going to lose weight. But Raymond's mom was like, no, there's something wrong with my child. We need to get him out of this camp now. But then on the other side, Gerard, who remember was Raymond's tent mate, he walked into the tent and saw Raymond collapse and fall into a seizure. Then Gerard ran out and called for help, where Alex and Michael then came into the tent. Alex then took one look at Raymond unconscious and told him that he's faking it. Then Michael tried to wake Raymond up and punched him in the face while he was unconscious. But shockingly, there was no change. And then, after 11 days when he last spoke to his mom, Raymond Buys was then rushed to hospital. Now, Raymond's mom heard that her son was now in hospital, so she rushed to the hospital. But when she got to the front door and she was going to ask for Raymond, they kind of like grabbed her under the arm and then started dragging her out of the hospital. And Raymond's mom was like, what the heck is going on? I want to see my son. But then, according to security said, no, you've been reported as the one who did this to your son, so we're not letting you anywhere near your child. So Raymond's mom is like, this is absolute madness. What the hell is going on here? So she sat there and had an absolute hissy fit. And eventually the police came and Raymond's mom then said, I never did this. And she kept explaining that he was at this camp. The police believed her, and then she was able to see her son. While Raymond's mom was heading towards Raymond, the police then went the other way and were now heading to the farm. But let's start with what Raymond looked like. Raymond was extremely dehydrated. He had a broken arm in 2 places, burn marks, burn scars, cigarette burns, electrical burns, chemical burns, cuts and bruises, broken ribs. He was starving. He had very bad malnutrition, and some of his wounds were weeks old, and both ears at the top were cut off. His kidneys were failing. He had brain damage, and sadly, his mom had to sit here and watch him die. Then, on the 20th of April 2011, Raymond succumbed to his injuries after 4 weeks of battling this in the hospital. When police went to look at the camp, they realized that Raymond was not the first boy to die at this camp or at the hands of the camp owners. There were reports that 2 other boys passed away from seizures or heart attacks at 19 years old, and the one boy even had seatbelt marks on his neck. But Alex and the people who worked there before were let off with only slaps on the wrists. But when the police got there after Raymond's mom was with Raymond, Michael was immediately arrested at the camp, and Alex would only be arrested weeks later because he went on the run, and they were then taken to prison to await trial. Both Alex and Michael pleaded not guilty, and they were charged with neglect, child abuse, murder, failure to provide adequate clothing, food, and housing, and for assault. Alex DeCocker would point the finger at Michael Erasmus and vice versa. It was an incredibly messy trial. But during the trial, Alex said that Raymond was the one that did it to himself, and that Alex didn't touch a single boy, and that the reason Raymond had all these cuts, bruises, marks, burns on his body was because he was running into buildings or trying to escape. So let's just pause there. So this 49-year-old man, Alex DeCocker, said that this 15-year-old boy did this to himself because he was running headfirst into buildings, pouring acid or chemicals onto his own body, burning himself with a cattle prod, tying his own hands behind his back, because that is a very hectic skill, and then beating himself. So thankfully, the judge believed absolutely nothing coming out of Alex DeCocker's mouth. But then to make things even worse, Alex then turned around and said that young 15-year-old Raymond was a horrible kid and he deserved everything that he got. But he still did it all to himself, according to Alex. So just make that clear. But then, in 2015, Alex DeCocker and Michael Erasmus were found guilty of murder, child abuse, and assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm. Alex was sentenced to 20 years for murder, plus 5 years for child abuse, and 2 years for assault. Michael Erasmus was sentenced to 3 years under correctional supervision and 15 years suspended. So to put that clearly, Alex will go to jail. Michael has been and gone to jail only for 3 years, and he's now on a 15-year suspended sentence. Basically, he's a free man. He just mustn't do anything naughty for 15 years. But Alex had no reaction to his sentence. He just sat there. He knew that it was coming. Also, as a side note, there were a few articles that mentioned that Raymond was apparently gay, and that's why he acted in these ways. But even if young Raymond Buys was gay, not that it matters to anybody else, the anger and the pure hatred that Alex DeCocker and Michael Erasmus had towards this young boy is disgusting. And we know that people still hate, people still find differences in people disturbing or uncomfortable. South Africa really does need to change, and we need to protect those who are vulnerable. We need to protect those who cannot defend themselves. And we also need to stop things like this happening right under our noses. And we can probably be sure that there are still camps like this somewhere in South Africa. And being under the guise of making a man out of you, letting these things happen to our children, to the youth of South Africa, is putting violence in their blood from an incredibly young age. And it's really not helping us with the future. But let me stop with my TED talk. Let me know what you think of this case down below. It is incredibly disturbing that this happened and that Alex still had the audacity to blame Raymond himself for this. But let me know what you think down below. I hope you all have a great week further. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.